Go with me to Matthew chapter 14, verse 22. Immediately Jesus made his disciples get into a boat and go before him to the other side, while he sent the multitude away. And when he had sent the multitude away, he went up in a mountain by himself to pray. Now when evening came, he was alone there, but the boat was now in the middle of the sea, tossed by the waves, for the wind was contrary. Notice that the wind was contrary. Now in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went to them walking on the sea. When he came to his disciples, they saw him walking on the sea, and they were troubled, saying, "It's a ghost." And they cried out for fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Be of good cheer, it is I, do not be afraid." Peter answered him and said, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." He said, "Come." When Peter had come down out of the boat, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. He walked on the water to go to Jesus. But when he saw that the wind was boisterous, he was afraid. He began to sink, and he cried out, saying, "Lord, save me." And immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and caught him and said, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" And when he got back into the boat, the wind ceased. Then those who were with him in the boat came and worshiped him, saying, "Truly you are the Son of God." So here, what caused Peter to walk on the water? His faith, right? He said, "Come." Peter had faith. He got out of the boat. He walked on the water, right? When he saw the circumstances that were already there, when he saw the circumstances, God didn't punish him. God didn't make him sink. God didn't dunk him, right? The fear took over and faith left, and he reduced himself to a meager man. What happens to every man when he comes out of a boat, right? So peace left, the supernatural left, the miracle left, and all God had for him left. What did Jesus want him to do? Walk on the water. What did he do? He took his eyes off Jesus. He looked at the circumstances. The circumstances took over. There's no other way to play it out. The miracle is in believing God to the end, having faith to the end. Any doubting will get you to sink. Any doubting will get you to the circumstances to take over. And so we learn here, and we're going to look at this again a little bit later in the message, but when we learn here, fear unplugged faith. It's a way of doubting God. It's a way of saying that, God, you don't have the power to do this. God, you don't have the power to keep me afloat on the water. The fear took over just like gravity takes over, right? And so while he walked in faith, he walked in the supernatural. We do the same thing. Any situation, great or small, in your life, it's our faith is required to receive from God. Some things are easier because, we don't see salvation. It's easy to believe you're saved, right? There's no change. There's nothing physically that changes. Our hearts change and we should change, but if you're sick and you have an element of sickness, as I've had through this series, you're fighting that. You're praying against it, right? And so we need to understand that no matter if we can see it or feel it, any of our senses can engage in it, that God has the power in his word, if it lines up with his word, that we can have it, because all of his promises are yes and amen to us. And so we need to learn that it's through faith and by faith that we receive. If you go back to Numbers, go to Numbers 13 and go to verse 1. It says, "And the Lord spoke to Moses," it says, "Send spies into the land of Canaan, which I have given to the children of Israel. From each tribe of their fathers you shall send a man, everyone a leader among them." So Moses sent them from the wilderness of Paran, according to the command of the Lord, all of them men who were the heads of the children of Israel, right? Jump down to verse 30. So they came back, and verse 30 says, "And Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, 'Let us go up at once and take possession, for we're well able to to overcome it. But the men who had gone up with him said, "We're not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we are." They gave the children of Israel bad report of the land, which they had spied out, saying, "The land through which we have gone as spies is a land that devours its inhabitants. All the people whom we saw are men of great stature. There we saw giants of the descendants of Anak, which came from the giants. And we were like grasshoppers in our own sight. So were we in their sight." So we see a divided group. Now, they all had the same demographic. They all had the same experience with God. They all seen the miracles in Egypt. They all seen the going through the Red Sea on dry ground. They all seen God disposing. He scuttled Egypt so Egypt could never come after them. He scuttled them. He took their food. He debarked their trees. He killed their army. He destroyed them for them so they would never come back after them, right? And here they are saying God's not able to because we see ourselves as grasshoppers in their sight, and they see us as grasshoppers in their sight. And it goes on, and it says, so all the congregation lifted up their voices and cried, and the people wept that night. And all the children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron. The whole congregation said to them, "If only we had died in the land of Egypt, or if only we had died in the wilderness. Why has the Lord brought us out of the land to fall by the sword, that our wives and our children should become victims? Would it have been better for us to stay in the land of Egypt, to stay a slave?" So they all, with one another, said, "Let us select leaders and return to Egypt." And Moses and Aaron fell on their face before the assembly and the congregation of the children of Israel. So, here, let's go through all the facts. What did God want them to do? Take the land, right? So that was his promise. This is your land, right? They were not capable of having faith to believe God to take the land. So they never got the land. What stood in the way? Unbelief, doubting, lack of faith. They didn't believe God's power, right? What did it cause them to do? It caused them to live in anxiety. It caused them to live in fear. It caused them to be irrational in their thinking. That, why didn't God kill us in the wilderness? Why didn't he kill us, in Egypt? Why didn't we stay in Egypt as a slave and have no rights? Why? When you look at it, they blamed God for their lot in life, right? But they walked in their own lot in life, right? They had unneeding crying, weeping, agony, worry, and concern. They had sleepless nights about their future. They were irrational in their thoughts and their actions. They were willing to stay a slave, rather than be delivered, and they never experienced God's best for them, and it was there all the time. So God had to take them into, rounding in the wilderness in circles for 40 years to get everyone over 20, except a handful of people, to die off. And he trained the next generation to go in and take the land, Joshua. And so when I look at this, I say, God has many things for me, but if I don't have the knowledge and then the faith, it never comes into my life. And we need the two. We need knowledge, because faith is knowledge. It's not a blind leap. There's no blind leap. It's knowing what God is and knowing what he said and knowing what he gave us. And so when you look at this, you see that we experience the power of God through faith, only faith. And we see the glory of God in our life and the supernatural in our life when we walk by faith,